I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I'm going
Hey,
in
I'm Danielle
circles,
Davies, and you're
going
listening to
in
Roar, a
circles.
show that
I
amplifies
should
the
get
voices of women
away
breaking
from
barriers, leading
here.
change, and
There's a
making real
better place
impact.
for me,
Keep listening for bold
better
ideas and
place for
stories that
me.
inspire you to
Trying to
find your
play my
voice and make some
symphony,
noise.
but there's so much.
Today, we're speaking with Rachel Honeyman, CEO and founder of HoneyBeBold, a branding and web design agency. In addition to the work Rachel does to empower women in business, she also helps them be bold in their lives by teaching self-defense using her martial arts background. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
I am so glad to have you here. Thanks so much for being part of this. We were talking about how on the Roar podcast, I want to talk to women who are leading change for women in many different ways, whether it's through activism, traditional activism, or advocacy, or politics, or theater, or writing, or in this case, self-defense, which I think is such a great and cool offering that you have. Can you just tell us a little bit about the overall structure just before we get into it, like what exactly you offer?
Yeah, so my primary offering these days, because my I would say the focus of my work is kind of in the branding and web design space, most of the time. So most of the ways that I engage in the self-defense work these days is through my course. I have a streaming digital course called Fearless Femmes, that anyone can do anywhere they are. But I also teach one-on-one classes locally. I'm in Long Island, New York, and here and there I travel for seminars. So it's something that I'm very, very passionate about, and I am always looking to do more of and find new ways to teach these skills to women.
And it's just for women. That's correct, right?
Yeah, so I just teach women. I really am very focused on making it a very safe environment. A lot of women who come to me for self-defense training, many of them have, unfortunately had experiences that are perhaps traumatic. And so I don't want to ever make the environment unsafe in any way. And so that's why I keep it to women only.
And we talk about this too? Because, you mentioned on your website the statistics of women in violent crime. And so, some people, my son used to take karate a million years ago, and it was an activity. It was something he could do and he could be proud of and he could earn his belts. And that was awesome for a little kid. But I remember one time the sensei teaching them and picking them up and running out of the building and telling them to scream fire. And I was like, it's actually teaching them a really hard skill set, how to get help if you need it. And so you don't always think of self-defense. Some people might think of it as exercise even, and it is. But how do you see it in terms of the broader realm of advocacy for women?
Yeah, so you know, it's so interesting. Whenever the topic of self-defense for women comes up, one of the common refrains is, "Well, we shouldn't be teaching women how to defend themselves. We should just be teaching boys and men to not attack women." And I say, "Well, yeah, obviously, like we should be doing that too." And I wish we lived in a world where I could wave a magic wand and there was no violence against women anymore. But unfortunately, we live in a pretty scary world, and women are faced with violence and potential violence every day. I think that all of us walk around with some level of fear that's kind of just underneath and is there all the time. We always are aware that this is a possibility. Some women don't want to think about that, but I'm a very strong advocate of we need to face the reality in order to deal with the reality and to empower ourselves to be able to face that reality in an empowered way. Um, so yeah, I think that it's super important to have those skills and to understand what you need to do to get yourself to safety. And that's really my approach. I kind of look at this in a three-pronged approach. I call it the three E's of self-defense because it's a nice round nice round number, but it actually really works. So my approach is evade, escape, engage. So we always look at evading situations. We want to avoid situations. That is the number one thing that I am teaching women is to avoid getting into a bad situation to begin with. Then how do you escape a bad situation if you're ever faced with one, right? How do you get out of a bad situation? You're cornered, someone comes up to you, someone is approaching you. How do you get yourself to safety? And then the final leg of that is engaging. How do we actually fight back? How do we defend ourselves? How do we harm our attacker if we need to? And that's kind of the difference in my approach to self-defense for women, from a lot of stuff that you see online, unfortunately, is so focused on the, you need to like hit them in the right spots. And it's all focused on like, how do you fight back, right? Which is important, although a lot of what's being taught is garbage. That's my personal opinion. But I think that the focus really needs to be on how do we avoid this to begin with? How do we get ourselves to safety? And then how do we engage again in order to get ourselves to safety, not to become a fighter?
It's so interesting because I was going to ask that next. I was looking at it from the outside in as this is a physical thing, a way to physically protect myself and feel physically stronger. But really, it's doing the mental work as well and the emotional work as well. Without giving away your course, or maybe can we dive into these 3 E's a little bit more? Like, can you talk about some of the strategies? Now, I just want to use this information. But also, it's interesting too. And we've spoken before today too, about like, I have a teenage daughter, so she's 15, and you don't start to see, you're always aware, but you're just like hyper aware as they go out in the world a little bit more on their own and independently of all these different ways. And you're thinking, evade, like you just see the potential for harm in so many things, and without being a helicopter mom or hovering and not letting her experience things, it's just sometimes can be really hard. Do you have any, if we talk about the 3 E's a little bit more, maybe you could give our listeners a little bit of insight? Would you mind diving into them a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, the first E, evade, really comes down to situational awareness. And that's, I spend, when I give a workshop, let's say I give a 90-minute workshop, probably at least 20 minutes of that is spent just talking about these situations and talking about the mindset and talking about situational awareness. And it's really a reframing that many people are not, just aren't thinking about. So as an example, right? Texting, we are always on our phones, texting on our phones. I am just as guilty of this as anyone else. But one thing that I have worked really hard on is when I'm, for instance, walking from the grocery store to my car, it's a, 3-minute walk, right? Maybe I parked far and it's a 5-minute walk. I am really, really careful to not take my phone out of my bag, because I know that if my phone is in my hand, I'm going to look at it. And I don't want to be looking at my phone. I want to be paying attention to my surroundings. When I'm at the gas station and I'm pumping gas, I have my phone on me, but I'm not looking at my phone. I am pumping the gas and I am constantly scanning this situation. And I can share a story shortly about recently where that actually saved me. I could have wound up in a very, very scary situation, and I was able to get away because I was paying attention to my surroundings. And this happened just 2 months ago, something like that. It's being much more aware of what's going on around you. Does that mean you're never going to, lose sight of what's going on? No, we all have a million things going on. This is not about reaching for perfection. And I think that that's sometimes where people can get overwhelmed by these ideas, because they're like, well, I'm never going to be paying attention to my surroundings all the time. No, of course not. But it's also about, like, the example I always give is when you go to the grocery store or to wherever, right? You're going and you're parking your car. It's paying attention to, where am I parking my car? Am I parking under a street lamp? Are there cars around? Am I, tucked behind a corner where no one's going to see me? It's paying attention to those things and it's kind of like the pre-paying attention, right? Because when you're coming out of the store, you're much less likely, because you're going to be busy holding a million bags and all of that. You're much less likely to be paying attention to those things than when you're proactively parking your car and making those choices. So yeah, I think it's just that's to me the most important piece of avoiding bad situations is really learning to start paying attention to what's going on around you.
Which is crazy because just thinking about holidays and things coming up, it just gets more chaotic and you become less able to kind of center unless you're making that effort.
Yeah. And it's not easy. That's really why I focus so much on it, because it's not easy. It's not something that you can just flip that switch and it's now, okay, now I pay attention. No, this is something that, I've been doing martial arts for 9 years now. And it's something that I'm still improving all the time. I'm still improving it. It's something I'm still working on all the time. And sometimes I lapse and sometimes and sometimes I'm better about it. And those moments where, if this is a good time for me to share that story, I can share that story, of something that happened a couple months ago. So I was pumping gas. I actually had just finished jujitsu class. I go to a 6 a.m. jujitsu class. That's why my hair is wet right now, because I just came from class. And I stopped at a gas station, like literally up the block from my jujitsu gym. And I'm pumping gas and so it's like 7 a.m. or something like that. It was still pretty dark and not, people aren't around.
Is this a gas station you've been to before?
I had not stopped there before, but
Okay.
it's a very busy street. It's right there. It's, and I was on empty and I needed gas. So I'm pumping gas, and thankfully I was following my advice, and I was scanning, the area, and I see this guy pull into the gas station. He's in a truck and he's staring right at me, like making eye contact with me. And he pulls in such a way, he didn't pull up to a pump. He pulled up in this weird way, kind of at an angle in front of my car. And something, like, I just had this gut feeling, something is off. And I all of a sudden had this voice in my head saying, I need to get in my car before he gets out of his car. And so I put the pump back. I didn't even screw the tank closed. I ran around to the side of my car, and I'm getting into my car right as he's getting out of his car, and he's still making eye contact with me the whole time. I get in my car, I close the door, lock the door, and I was able to drive around him. And I, go around the corner and I look back to kind of just see what's going on. And he was getting right back into his car, because he had only stopped because he saw a woman by herself pumping gas at an empty gas station, and he saw an opportunity. And
oh my gosh, that's so scary.
Yeah. And these things happen all the time. And I don't know if he was going to just come and, say something and not necessarily even, touch me. Who knows? But, he could have also been planning to kidnap me or rape me, or who knows what his plans were. But he saw an opportunity and he pulled over, and he had no reason to stop at that gas station other than to take advantage of that opportunity. And because I was aware and paying attention to what was going on, and one other key point here, the probably most important thing that I teach my students is that gut feeling that we get as women. We get this gut feeling, and most of the time we ignore it because our society tells us to ignore that feeling. And it tells us, oh, you're being hysterical, you're being crazy. And we internalize that, and we say, it's nothing, right? How often do you have that feeling and you say, it's nothing?
Actually, it's crazy that you're saying this, because now we're like, yes, all the time you have it. And the first thing that struck me when you were telling the story is how the guy was staring right at you and not breaking eye contact. And I'm thinking, when that happens to me, because that happens, this is a universal thing that affects women. It's not like it's anything rare or, you know, when you hear people say, oh, if that happens, it's not if, it's when. There are always going to be situations where you're being made to feel intimidated, frightened,
Yep.
ill at ease. Maybe nobody's actually physically doing anything, but you're always aware that they could be, and
Yep.
you're out of luck. But when that happens, when, you know, that first eye contact is made or something, I feel like I'll look down because I get anxious. But would you recommend that? No, look at the person. Did you break eye contact yourself? What did you do?
I did not break eye contact. I looked directly at him, and I when I made that decision to put the pump back and get back in my car, I maintained eye contact the whole time because I wanted him to know, like, I am avoiding this. Whatever this is, I'm avoiding it. You're not going to mess with me today. And you know, that is something that probably it really did take me years to build that level of confidence. I don't think that's something that just any, you know, that, oh, just decide that you're gonna like be that level of confident. But I think that the key thing is, if you get a gut feeling that something is off, pay attention to it. The biggest thing that I always tell my students is, like, we have such a need to people please, right? And we have such a I mean, I think that many women, I'm not going to say most women because maybe that's not the case, but I don't think that I'm in the minority when I'm a people pleaser, and it's very hard for me to make someone else feel uncomfortable, right? But if I'm walking down the street and I see a guy walking towards me, even if there's like there's nothing there, there's no actual danger here, but I just feel a little bit uncomfortable walking by a guy and like when I'm by myself. So I'm going to cross the street, and he might notice that I'm crossing the street. And so fucking what? Like,
But
who cares?
right,
Like,
and he might be offended. It is so crazy because it's not just that you don't want to, it's not just that you wouldn't offend somebody, it's how hard we work not to offend somebody at the expense of our own safety. Like, we're like,
exactly.
oh, I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable, but I would really like you to stop touching my leg. Like,
Right.
you,
Yeah.
my gosh, that's so that is, and it took, like you said, it takes years to get to this point. Is that how you work when people come to you? Are they anticipating this? Like, do you let them know in advance that this is going to be because I really do feel like this is the critical information here. Yes, of course, like you're right. The physical stuff, how you can stop somebody, that's great. But let's just hope we never even get to that point and work on these first two steps first. But I
Yeah.
do think even the thing, as much as, you know, evading, it's that making that eye contact and having that confidence to do that does seem like something that would take work. Do you recommend, how do you recommend that people do that? Because the class doesn't go on forever. How do you build that confidence?
Yeah. So most of my students, I assume I'm going to see them once. You know,
Okay.
sometimes I have people who come to me more than once, but and you know, we do a series, or you know, sometimes they're interested in private lessons, and so we'll continue. But when I run like a, you know, intro self-defense workshop, I'm assuming that I'm only going to see this group of people once. And so I really try to, you know, yes, we go over techniques. Like that of course, we're going to go over techniques, and there's going to be some physical aspect to it. But I say over and over and over again, like, the most important thing is for you to come away with principles. And those principles are, you know, the most important thing. Pay attention to your gut, protect your head, right? Like that's also really, really important. Our head that's our computer. If we get knocked out, like, we're in trouble. So pay attention to your gut, protect your head, look for ways to get to safety. And if people come away with just that, like, I've won. I've done a good job. How do you build that? It takes practice. So that's the other thing that I really try to to convey is that, you're going to have, an hour with me, 2 hours with me, maybe we'll work together and, we have 100 hours together. It doesn't really matter. Like, you need to be practicing this in your day-to-day life. And so it's just little things. It's little things like, okay, I'm going to commit myself to, when I'm pumping gas, I do not have my phone in my hand, and I'm not scrolling on my phone. I'm paying attention to what's around me. It's an activity that takes all of 3 minutes, right? Like, it doesn't take long to pump gas. So making that commitment can make a really big difference. Again, paying attention to where you're parking, that it makes a huge difference. And so it's these little things. It doesn't take hours of practice. It takes those moments of practice throughout your daily life that really start ingraining that.
Building a habit.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily plan to get political, but especially, in our current political environment, we just recently had a guy out west saying, I believe he's out west saying, your body, my choice. So we've got like kind of a significant rape culture happening. And so I feel like it's more important than ever to be on guard. And I don't want to prevent myself. I don't want to prevent my daughter from doing things and exploring the world. You want that for yourself and for people.
Yeah.
But you have to have these things kind of in place to be able to
Correct.
do it.
Yeah. And I think that is when I've seen that going around this, your body, my choice. And it's like, it was such a like affirming, unfortunately affirming thing. Like, we need to be empowered in our bodies and to be able to say, I have the knowledge and the skills and the tools that I need to prevent that from happening to me, and to prevent that from happening to my daughters, and to prevent that from happening to my friends, right? Like, it's something that we can't, because this is becoming so pervasive
and acceptable.
Like, we have to stand up and take charge. And this is really our ability to feel secure in our bodies, to take charge of our safety, and not to put that in someone else's hands. And I think that when a lot of women avoid thinking about this, I do encounter that quite a bit, where I have women who are like, this is too scary. Like, I don't even want to think about this. And I get it. Like, it's scary. It's really scary to think about this stuff. But if you don't, you're in a bad situation, because you are leaving your safety and security up to someone else. And I can't stand for that. Like, I just can't stand for that. I think that every woman needs to take charge of her own safety. And as a community of women, we can help each other feel empowered in our bodies and in charge of our safety.
It's interesting too, because you're saying, like, let us have our own empowerment, as we should. And it's such a, unfortunately, newer concept that it's still exciting. About a week and a half ago, I spoke to Lisa Kinsella. She's the founder of what's going to be the first female liner. And the name of the company is Louis, Luwi, and it's short for Let Us Wear It. Like, we will take care of ourselves. You can't just rely on the guy, maybe you've got a really great supportive partner and he's like super protective. Great, but that doesn't mean you're attached at the hip. You need to be able to protect yourself at all times. And I think of my husband is very protective of my daughter. My son is protective of my daughter, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean she's not going to go explore the world on her own. So you've got to really step up and do this for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, an interesting thing, years ago, I was really active in politics, and I interviewed a lot of female politicians, women politicians. And it was Tammy Duckworth, actually, Senator Tammy Duckworth, who's awesome. She said something like, and I'm paraphrasing here, there are a lot of men, they run for office and they say stuff like, I'm totally generalizing, but you say, you know, oh, I could see myself running for office. I could see myself being the president. And for women, again, this isn't universal, but it tends to be that a lot of women end up running for office or advocating for something because they've seen a problem, they've seen a gap, and they want to step in and fix it. And I think, you know, I think it's Patty Murray, Senator Patty Murray is originally started off, and I could be wrong here, with expiration dates on food. You know, there didn't used to be expiration dates on food when you went to the grocery store, and you'd have to kind of, you know, barter and, you know, talk to the guy stocking things to be like, hey, is this really fresh? Like, I need the fresh stuff. I can't have it go bad. And there was no real way of knowing. You know, they'd have different color twist ties for codes and things like this until somebody stepped up. And this seems like a very small problem to have now because we don't have this problem. Our food is labeled. How old is this milk? Up, it expired 5 days ago. We know this, but it's because of a mom who was doing the shopping for her kids and her family for the week finally stepped up and was like, enough is enough. Somebody has to label this, and somebody advocated for it and made the change. So I see, again, this is not universal, but women seem to be in a position where we're stepping up where we see a need. Can you tell us what you saw personally that even got you involved in this? Or did it start off as something like you're like, oh, you know, jujitsu, this seems like something interesting? Or was there a reason that you got into this in self-defense, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't mind you asking. So the reason I started jujitsu, and jujitsu is only one of the martial arts that I practice, but it's the primary one. But the reason I started was 10 years ago. So about a year before I started jujitsu, this is like it's gonna sound like very familiar, right? From the stories that I've told so far and the advice I've given so far. I went to a grocery store, Whole Foods, and it was at night. It wasn't like midnight. It was probably like 7 p.m., but it was like this time of year. So it was dark. And I was walking back to my car. And as I'm walking back to my car, I feel this like prickle on the back of my neck. Something is telling me that like something's off. Like someone's following me, something's off. And I did what we talked about. And I said, it's nothing. It's nothing. There's nothing that I'm being crazy. Like, let me just get to my car and like unload my groceries. So I'm unloading my groceries on the passenger side of the car. And I turn around, and lo and behold, a man was cornering me at my car. And he was talking to me, and it wasn't in English. I don't remember what language he was speaking. I was surrounded by Spanish, so it definitely wasn't Spanish because I would have recognized that. It was some other language. And he's talking to me, but I couldn't understand what he was saying, but like I understood what he was saying. You know what I mean? Like he was trying to make an advance, and I froze. But I somehow, like I can't really tell you the details because I don't remember now, and like it happened so fast, but I somehow got myself like around to the driver's side, and I left the parking lot. I got home like, you know, it was like a blink of an eye. Like I probably ran a million red lights, and like I just, you know, I was like so terrified. And knowing what I know now, I think like this was obviously not a good guy, right? Like who follows a woman back to her car late at night? Like this is, you know, not a good guy. But he probably wasn't actually planning on hurting me, because if he had been planning on it, there's no way I would have like gotten out of that situation. So I just got lucky, basically. I got lucky that this guy didn't have those intentions necessarily. And, you know, I got lucky. But it really put the fear in me where I said, if things had escalated, like I have no tools. I have no idea what to do. I have no idea how to defend myself and keep myself safe. And so I ran home, and I immediately reached out to one of my best friends, who now is my instructor, actually, Jarlo Alano. And he he's been doing martial arts for decades, and he's one of my mentors with women's self-defense, because he's been teaching women's self-defense for many, many, many years. And I said, what do I do? Like, where do I start? So he said, start with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because it's a grappling sport, which is basically, it's mostly ground-based, and it's all about using leverages. So using your body and using physics basically to that a smaller person can overpower a larger person, getting a larger person off of you, that sort of thing. And so it's a really, really good place to start for women in particular. And I'm a very small woman. So it was, really, really good place to start. And then over the years, it took me about a year to actually start. And then over the years, I've kind of filled in some additional, some stand-up striking and weapons work, and really I have a pretty well-rounded approach now. But I still focus primarily on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But that was like how I got into it personally. And then it took a few years like of me practicing it myself, where I said, I need to teach this to other people. Like most women just have no idea what to do. Most women are in that situation where if they were faced with something like that, they just would freeze, and they have no idea what to do and how to keep themselves safe. And I just had this need to share that with other people. And so I had this idea for this course years ago, probably, I don't know when exactly, but I've had this idea for this course for a long, long time, because I looked around online and I said, there's really nothing, there's a lot of like bad information online. There are a lot of, popular self-defense accounts on Instagram or YouTube or whatever that are really teaching dangerous techniques. Like like if I use that technique, I would get myself killed. Like it's really, really there's very, very bad techniques being taught online. And what finally pushed me to make the course was, it was the early days of COVID. And you just started hearing more and more reports of domestic violence, increasing. And I couldn't stop thinking about these women stuck in a house with a violent man and not knowing what to do. And I couldn't like live with people not having access to the information that they need to keep themselves safe. And so then it wound up taking a little bit more time to actually make the course, because it was COVID, so I couldn't actually do it at the right then. But I wound up making this course, and I actually released it just about a year ago. And I really focused on how can I give the most crucial information and the most crucial techniques that will help women stay safe. Like that was really my focus, was just my ultimate goal in everything that I do is keeping women safe and helping women, feel empowered in their bodies and feel empowered to keep themselves out of bad situations, get away from bad situations if they wind up there, and defend themselves if they need to.
When you were talking, I'm thinking about how you're saying there's like a lot of bad information out there. And I'm thinking, as we've got on one hand, like this kind of blooming and acceptable rape culture going on, you want to think you combat it with like this movement of empowering women to defend themselves, evade any kind of danger, the whole nine yards. And I wanted to say, how do you see that evolving, that positive side? But is it evolving, or is it being kind of overrun by bad actors? And not necessarily that they're bad actors, but maybe they're just misinformed and they're sharing information that is, like you said, actually more harmful than good. I mean, I don't think anybody who tries to research that they're obviously trying to learn something that's going to keep them safe. And the fact that it could possibly make their situation worse is terrifying.
Yeah. I like to think that, most of the people sharing bad information just don't know that they're sharing bad information. The system that I am trained in is like very, very focused on pressure testing everything. So really putting things to the test, putting techniques to the test, and making sure like this would work if you have a larger, stronger person trying to attack you, right? And I think most people who call themselves self-defense teachers don't necessarily take it through that process. So they'll teach something that will work really well against someone who's like a very, passive participant and like helping them show the technique. But the minute you add in some pressure and you add in like more real life type of
Aggression.
scenarios, aggression, right? Like it just doesn't work. So I don't think that people have bad intentions. I think it's just that people don't haven't taken the time to really, really like put the techniques they're teaching to the test and make sure that they actually work. I think also I mentioned this earlier, but I think that there is a too much emphasis on teaching women, striking techniques, for instance, like how to hit your opponent in just the right places. I think, again, like I'm a big advocate. If you need to use violence against an attacker, you should absolutely use that violence, because this is someone who is trying to, whether they're trying to rape you or murder you, they're trying to hurt you in a very, very serious way. And we know this. We know that someone who rapes a woman is not so won't care that much about killing her either, right? Like there's the violence against women can escalate so much, and sometimes you might have family members with you. You've mentioned your daughter, and like I think that people don't like to think about this, and I get it, but you have to be ready to meet violence with violence if you need to. But if there's too much emphasis on the fighting back without focusing on getting yourself to safety, you're actually putting women at harm, because that needs to be number one. Number one needs to be, I need to get myself to safety, and the like harming your attacker needs to be secondary to that. If you don't need to, then you shouldn't, because you need to get yourself to safety. So whatever you need to do to get yourself to safety, that's the goal.
It is interesting too, because the evasion techniques almost sound like they could be a class on their, that sounds like it could be a class on its own. When you were telling me the story about, which I'm so sorry that happened to you and how terrifying, but that the guy started talking, my initial thought was, well, was he talking nice? Like, even if you couldn't understand him, was he being nice, or was he being antagonistic and aggressive right from his language? Because one of the things that I notice is if somebody is being polite, or they haven't really breached that societal marker of like apparent harm, even if your shackles are raised, you're still being nice back. Like, you're still being polite. So even if somebody comes in your space and you have that feeling of, this is not right, if they're still saying, ma'am, I just was wondering if you are not yet trying to evade. You might be like I said, you might be starting to feel those skin pricks, but you're not necessarily taking the steps to get yourself out of the situation, because you're being so polite, because you are being such a people pleaser. So
Yeah.
that it's just, I feel like the evasion techniques are just needed across the board. I mean, there are some women who are, I'm sure there are plenty who have it down, and kudos to them. But for those of us who don't, and I am always so guilty. My husband will be like, it doesn't matter if they're being nice. Like, there are nice killers. Like they might
Yeah.
act like this, but that's not who they are. So it's interesting. I think the evasion thing could be not the evasion thing, but learning to evade is such a priority. And I'm so glad you focus on it.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say a couple of things on that. You know, if someone, first of all, this guy was actually not being aggressive. He was being nice. He was being, he was in my space though. And so
Right.
that's number one is it doesn't matter how nice someone's being, if they have crossed that threshold of being in your space. And the most important thing is if you can touch them, they can touch you, right? So if someone has crossed that boundary, you already need to have your guard up. And so I teach, like, we put our hands up, right? If someone is getting past that boundary, you have your hands up and you're just signaling to them, like, you got to back up. Like you're in my space, you got to back up. And having your hands up really has you at the ready for a lot of the techniques that I teach, but it's like such a simple thing, but it's just kind of like, this is, you're entering my space and I don't feel comfortable with this. And you don't have to be aggressive, right? You can be super polite and be like, you know, but just you're signaling to them, like, this is not okay.
And that you're aware that they're doing it, you know,
Yeah.
you're not, yes.
Yeah. And then the other thing I'll say is that sometimes even something that seems innocent can should be setting those red flags off. So the best example I love to give is if someone stops and asks you for the time. You should automatically say something is up here, because everyone has the time in their pocket 24 hours a day, right? We all have our phone on us all the time, and we all have the time constantly, right? And if you don't have a phone, you have a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or whatever. Like, no one needs the time anymore. They just don't. And if they happen to, their phone died, they don't have a watch, you know what? You don't want to be taking the minute to look at your watch, because you don't know what their intentions are. Maybe it's totally innocent, but you can just be like, sorry, I don't have it, and keep walking, right? And you don't have to be rude about it. You don't have to be like, get away, I don't like you, right? Like, it's a simple thing. If someone, you know, stops and asks me for the time, I'll just say, sorry, I don't have it, and I'll keep walking. And as I'm walking, I'm looking over my shoulder and I'm seeing if they're following me, right? Like, I just am aware. I'm aware that this is the reality. We live in a world where we have to be aware of this. Does that mean that I think this is important to say. Does that mean that I walk around with fear constantly, or that, like, I keep myself from doing things? No, like, it's not about that. And that's, I think, the key is when you really embody this sense of empowerment. It's about making smart, safe choices, right? Like, there are certain things that I won't do. I won't walk, you know, in a dark alley by myself at night. Like, I won't do it. There have actually been times where, you know, there's a need to go down a dark alley, and I'll just say, nope, not doing it, right? Like, I just won't do it. I live in Long Island, you know, close to Manhattan, and I had to go into the city, I don't know, a couple months ago, and it was dark and I was by myself, and I just walked the long way because, you know,
Right.
back to the train, because I was like, I just don't want to walk down a street that, like, there aren't too many people around, and, like, who knows? And so you make smart, safe choices, and being aware of the smart, safe choices to make doesn't mean that you're, like, keeping yourself in your house and not leaving and, you know, being afraid all the time.
Right.
You still go and do the things that you want to do, but you're smart about it. And you're paying attention to what's going on around you, and you're paying attention to that gut feeling. And when something feels off, you get yourself out of that situation. And again, it can be as simple as crossing a street, or, you know, just saying no thanks and continuing and walking, right? It doesn't have to be this constant, like, I'm like nervous all the time and I'm aggressive all the time. And if anyone like comes and talks to me or says hello, I'm gonna, punch them in the face, right? Like that's not what it's about. It's really just having that sense of like, I trust myself. I trust my gut. I trust that feeling, and I trust myself to make safe choices.
Well, and I feel like the more training you have in terms of listening to your gut, evading, and also learning all the tools that you teach, the more empowered you feel, the less you feel like that, like, I'm staying in my hand, my guard's up, and I'm going to walk to the car and I'm ready to go. You are more empowered because you do know what to look for and you are being aware, and I think it would give you a lot of freedom and empower you to kind of go see what you want to see and go do what you want to do because you've got this skill set in your pocket
Yeah.
and these very important life skills. So let me ask you one more thing. So you offer an online course, and if people are close to you, they can get you sometimes. But say somebody's far away and they really want to do work with somebody in person, do you have any recommendations for what they should be looking for? Especially because you mentioned, there are people who maybe haven't thought through and again, with best intentions, but maybe they haven't thought through the efficiency of what they're teaching. And do you have recommendations for what to ask for, what to look for?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's hard to say like as a blanket rule because, it is kind of like there are different systems and all that. But I think that kind of things to look for are number one, unfortunately, there are a lot of men who teach self-defense to women who shouldn't be teaching self-defense to women. And so again, it's about paying attention to that gut feeling. If you go and you try out a class and you get a weird vibe from the teacher, like don't go back. Don't go back. Like it's unfortunate that there are a lot of people like that shouldn't be teaching. I'm a big fan of women, looking for a female teacher if you can, but like my teachers were and are men, and I trust them, and so I'm not against working with men at all, but it's also about looking at who their students are. So do they have a strong group of female students who, embody that sense of empowerment? Can you speak to some of their students and get a sense of what to expect? And then, it's just a matter of really finding the right like environment that fits with you and that you feel comfortable in. Some environments are going to be more feel more safe and comfortable for women than others. And so I think that a lot of times, if you look for, if it's a women's self-defense class, obviously like their students are going to be women, but sometimes, you might find self-defense training that's within a co-ed environment, which is totally fine. But you want to just make sure that it's an environment that is safe and accommodating for women. If you have any history of trauma, that make sure that you speak with the instructor and and kind of gauge like how supportive are they? How understanding are they? Are they going to push you to do things that you don't feel comfortable with? There are some positions that I teach that that can be very triggering for women who have been assaulted. And I always say, like, I am not going to make anyone do anything that they feel uncomfortable doing. And I'll explain like why we're focusing on this. Why are we focusing on this position? What's the benefit of it? And if this is too triggering, like that's okay. You can go and you can watch. Or if it's too triggering to watch, that's also okay. Like you need to feel part of empowerment is also not just, beating yourself down in order to feel empowered, right? It's also advocating for yourself and saying like, I feel safe doing this. I don't feel safe doing that. And sometimes it's easing into things that may feel unsafe now, but maybe in a few months they'll feel a little bit more safe if you're in the right environment.
You're awesome. It's not, because I was thinking there was a self-defense course offered near me before, and it was men and a really great person that I know, but I felt like I would be physically intimidated. And because of that, it's almost like you need that safe space to learn these techniques, because if your shackles are already raised while you're going into it, how are you going to kind of let it permeate through? If you're already feeling anxious about it, how are you going to be able to listen for when you're feeling anxious? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I really appreciate your time. I know you have a coupon code for your course too, for our
I
listeners.
do. Yeah. So, obviously if anyone is in person in the New York City area and would like to work together, you can send me an email at hey@honeybebold.com. If you're not local, or if you are local, but don't feel like coming out to Long Island, that's okay. You can check out my course at honeybebold.com/fearless-course. And the coupon code is ROAR, ROAR.
Okay, I'm gonna
And that's
get
gonna
this,
and
and then
that's
I'll
gonna
put
give
it in the
you
show notes.
that's gonna give you 20% off the course.
That's great. Thank you for that. I'm gonna get this code from you when we hang up too, just so I can put it in our show notes so there's no mistake. And can you tell me, does that expire or when that might expire if it does?
Yeah, so it's going to expire December 31st at the end of this year, and that is solely for logistical purposes, because I'm switching to a different course platform. So that coupon code will expire December 31st. If you happen to hear this after December 31st and you are interested, just send me an email and I'll hook you up.
And Rachel, if you do this course, do you have access to it all the time? Like, is it an ongoing access type of
Yeah,
thing?
it's a self-paced course and you have access to it always. And you can always reach out to me with any questions. I'm available for support. And I also do Zoom sessions. Occasionally people will buy my course and then they'll want to do a little bit of additional, one-on-one. If they're not local, then we'll do it over Zoom to kind of go a little bit deeper.
And do you, just out of curiosity, travel for workshops? Like if people booked you for like a workshop
Yeah,
sometime?
yeah. I was actually in Maryland a couple months ago. So yeah, I do love traveling for workshops. So happy to set that up if anyone is interested.
That's good to know. Very good to know. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything that you wanted to share that we didn't go over?
No, I don't think so. I think this was such a great chat. And obviously you can tell I'm very passionate about this. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to share this with your listeners.
No, I really appreciate it. And I'm sure anybody who listens will too. So thank you so much. Have a great day. And I will have all of Rachel's information in our show notes. So be sure to look for those, check out any links, and I'll get your social media stuff as well.
Thank you so much.